An extraordinary new development in President Trump's push to take over Greenland as European leaders meet to discuss an emergency response to his new tariff threat. The president sent a letter to Norway's prime minister. According to a diplomat who's seen the note, he wrote in part, quote, "Dear Jonas, considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace, although it will always be predominant. We can now think about what is good and proper for the United States of America." CNN's Melissa Bell joins us live from Paris this morning. The Prime Minister of Norway now saying, yeah, that's the letter I got from President Trump talking about the Nobel Peace Prize. It's a pretty remarkable development.
It's a remarkable tone that struck in that letter, dear Jonas, that fit of pique almost at not having received the Nobel Peace Prize, used as justification for all that we've seen over the course of the weekend. And that is, John, this extraordinary ratcheting up of this pressure on Europe to try and force them essentially to hand over or sell Greenland to the United States, which is an extraordinary turn of events that now tariffs should be being used at this particular moment to try and exert pressure on Europe. And that timing is really unfortunate, John, for a number of reasons. First of all, because in front of European lawmakers was due this week the very deal that was signed last summer to avert a trade war between the United States and Europe, the trade deal that sets American tariffs at 15% and that prevents the European Union from imposing levies on the United States. What we understand now is that European lawmakers are not going to pass that deal as a result of these renewed threats of fresh tariffs on European Union countries. What that means is that if the deal is not agreed upon, the retaliatory 93 billion euro worth of European counter tariffs that had been threatened at the time before the deal was reached would come into effect in February. So really what you're seeing is the European Union preparing to answer very forcefully after a great deal of outrage expressed over the course of the last couple of days as a result of these renewed threats. The reimposition, therefore, of retaliatory tariffs being prepared even now by the European Commission, even though officially what we've heard this morning from the Commission spokesman, John, is that Europe is looking for de-escalation. They're looking for compromise, dialogue and negotiation, even as they prepare for these very forceful tactics. And beyond the imposition of these frozen retaliatory tariffs lies the possibility of what's been described as the bazooka option. This is the Europeans' anti-coercion tool, which would see an even greater number of limits placed on the United States' access to European markets. So a ratcheting up of the pressure, but a ratcheting up as well of the response, even as negotiation is sought on.
Yeah, talking in ways they really just haven't before. Melissa Bell in Paris this morning. Thank you. With us now is retired Major General James Spider-Marks, our friend. He is the head of geopolitical strategy at Academy Securities. And Spider, how does something like this land overseas? All these European leaders now and officials have been meeting, trying to figure out how to deal with the United States on this issue. And then they see this letter about the Nobel Peace Prize to the Prime Minister of Norway.
Yeah, it doesn't land very well. I mean, when you look at policies like this, or at least moving in this direction, the potential of embracing some type of a policy, I think many would say why it's being done makes sense. The United States should have a much more enhanced relationship with Greenland, albeit we have one established in 1951, an agreement that allows the United States to have military access and it kind of essentially, in my terms, provides cooperation between those two, one autonomous nation or autonomous entity to Denmark and the United States. So that can be identified and say, yeah, this is a good deal. But when you look at how the president in this administration is addressing the possibility of enhancing that, that gets very problematic in my mind. I think, cutting to the chase, the United States is not going to use military power to embrace Greenland or move Greenland in a direction more favorable toward the United States. And again, we already have a favorable relationship. Let's not harm that. But provocative language like this really gets our allies moving in a direction of hazarding what's going to happen to NATO if the United States suddenly says, okay, this is more important, Greenland's more important, this course of action is more important than our relationship to NATO, and NATO will atrophy. It'll become something entirely different than it is right now if the United States is not a part of NATO. So you can connect those dots pretty quickly.
Yeah, let's drill down on that last part you were just saying there. Do the rewards from U.S. control of Greenland, do they merit the risks and the potential damage being done to NATO?
Well, the run is not worth the slide in the case of a military operation against Greenland. That's why I think it's off the table. I mean, provocative language will always be out there. I mean, this is kind of a negotiating tactic. So I would say with confidence, the United States is not going to use military force against Greenland. Trying to acquire Greenland in a tighter relationship, certainly there are options. Look, we got Seward's Folly, right? 1867, we bought Alaska. Let's go buy Greenland. We can do that. If they want to, there's a seller, we can buy it. Don't know the situation regarding that. Certainly there are other relationships. Iceland was a part of Denmark as well until 1944. and they became independent, became a member of NATO. That's a potential path for Greenland as well. So in other words, there are options well below the threshold of military operation. Your question is, would military operation obviate a NATO as we know it today? Yeah, sure would.
And that would be an enormous risk, even if, and maybe even the mere suggestion of it could do things to NATO that maybe the United States long term would not want to see happen there. Major General James Spider-Marks, always great to see you. Thank you so much.
Greenland is dominating the agenda at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And as always, our Richard Prest has his ear to the ground and joins us now from Davos. Great to see you, Richard. I mean, no doubt that this is going to be very consequential, the conversation. So what are you hearing? Is President Trump going to get his way when it comes to Greenland?
They say you can't put a face on money, yet here I am, where ambitions meet their...
The European Union says it is continuing to engage with the United States at all levels. The ambassadors of the 27 countries met in Brussels last night. They discussed the prospect of retaliation. The broad consensus that's emerged today is to try and de-escalate. The leaders will be meeting in Brussels at a special summit on Thursday. President Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on 6 EU countries, as well as the UK and Norway, starting at 10% next month, unless they acquiesce to Greenland becoming part of the United States. This morning, the British Prime Minister said threatening tariffs on allies was the wrong thing to do, but at the same time, he ruled out any retaliatory tariffs. A trade war, he said, is in no one's interest. Our chief political correspondent, Henry Zeffman, has more.
How to handle President Trump? Sir Keir Starmer's answer to that complicated question is being tested today like never before.
Good morning. The world has become markedly more turbulent in recent weeks. The UK and the US are close allies and close partners. That relationship matters profoundly.
This wasn't Keir Starmer rebuking Donald Trump. This was him trying to justify why he's kept him close.
Mature alliances are not about pretending differences don't exist. They are about addressing them directly, respectfully, and with a focus on results.
All this because of an icy island a long way away, which, let's be frank, most of us have barely thought about before. President Trump says he needs more control of the Arctic, that it's vital for American and global security. And he's clearer than ever. He wants Greenland, part of Denmark, to be American instead.
The right way to approach an issue of this seriousness is through calm discussion between allies. Any decision about the future status of Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone.
This isn't just high-level geopolitics. President Trump's threat to impose tariffs on the UK over its objections to his plans means this matters to all of us.
Alliances endure because they're built on respect and partnership, not pressure. That is why I said the use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong.
Do you think Donald Trump is genuinely considering military action?
Look, I don't, actually.
The Prime Minister predicted that the US would not actually invade Greenland and hinted at the true scale of the transatlantic partnership.
The interaction on intelligence between the US and the UK is the closest relationship of any two countries in the world. And that keeps us safe in ways I can't explain to you.
For a Prime Minister who's invested so much energy in his relationship with President Trump over the past year, it's quite something for him even to say that the US president is wrong. But there'll be plenty in his party and in the country asking whether Keir Starmer went far enough.
From a British and European perspective, this has got much more to do with the sanctity of borders and the fact that you shouldn't allow countries to throw their weight around. Because if Putin gets away with it in Ukraine and Trump gets away with it in Greenland, then nobody is safe, and we're going to spend our whole time living in terror that borders will get changed by force.
The trade bazooka is like a genie out of the bottle. Could it spiral out of control where countries are using it in ways that haven't been foreseen, and that escalates tensions with Donald Trump rather than keeping him in a check and balance?
Is Greenland worth this sort of geopolitical fight that is currently taking place?
Amazing. This flock's hard at work growing their nest pensions, like this blue tit.
Dave?
Listen to the way they communicate.
Dave, you're on mute.
Sir Keir Starmer hitting back at President Trump's threats to impose tariffs on the UK and 7 other European countries in the ongoing row over the future of Greenland. Well, let's bring in our security and defence analyst, Professor Michael Clark, who joins us. And Michael, Donald Trump saying you must have Greenland for security. That's the word that keeps coming up. In fairness, Sir Keir Starmer talked about security as well, but national security. You've got the United States, which isn't actually the closest neighbour to Greenland. That's probably Iceland and Canada. But he says it's vital to have that big blob in the middle. Why? Why does he need it?
Yeah, I mean, that's my challenge to this argument. I mean, tell me what the security problems are that can't be dealt with under present arrangements. And there's 2 or 3 ways in which security is relevant. I mean, the one way that goes back to the 1950s is security against a missile attack against the United States. I mean, this is the map that we normally see of Greenland. But if you look at the map, the more accurate map is the one from the top down, looking at the roof of the world, the Arctic Circle, because the shortest distance between Russia, or for that matter, China and the United States, if there were to be a missile attack, is essentially over the North Pole. That's the way an attack would come. And so, of course, the United States has been worrying about that, thinking about it quite logically for the last 60, 70 years. And there's the Pitchufik space base, as it now is. It used to be Thule for many years. And the United States used to have 17 radar installations and bases across Greenland with 15,000 troops. Now they've got 1 with 150 troops, because that's all they thought they needed until a couple of years ago. And in addition to that, there are 47 radar installations in Canada and 15 radar installations there in Alaska, where the United States label is. That's Alaska. There is 1 in Fylingdales in Yorkshire, in Britain, just slightly off the map there. And there it is. I mean, that makes up what's called the BMUs, which is the ballistic missile early warning system, and it's a mixture of short-range and long-range radars. Entirely sensible. So that could be built up on Greenland if the Americans thought they wanted more than 1 base there. And the chances are they will do over time as technology changes. They may want more bases. They can have all of that within the 1951 agreement that they've got with Denmark. The second way in which security is an issue is that Russian and Chinese ships are buzzing around because they're interested in the opening Northwest Passage. Most of that map, remember, is ice. It looks as if it's all sea there, but actually most of it is ice. And within the Arctic Circle, a lot of it is dark for 12 hours and dark all day for 6 months and light all day for 6 months, right on the North Pole. But that varies a little bit around the Arctic Circle. But long periods of darkness, long periods of constant light. And there is interest in the opening of the Northwest Passage because global warming is creating this. And the United States has only really woken up to it very recently. The Nordics, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, they've been talking about it for years. We've been talking about it in Britain for years. America wasn't interested until recently. And then the third way, in which Scott Besson seemed to imply, and Miller seemed to imply, is that some sort of invasion from Russia or China towards Greenland. Well, they'd have to invade basically across the North Pole. Anyone who thinks that's feasible ought to look again at a map. It's not possible. So
he'll make up for it. All right, yes. The European Union is reportedly threatening to retaliate against the president's bid for Greenland, considering a, quote, trade bazooka on the U.S.
This as President Trump threatens new tariffs on NATO countries if no deal is made. Maddie Rivera is live in West Palm Beach with the latest. Hey, Maddie.
Hi, good morning, guys. Well, this trade bazooka that the EU is reportedly considering using against the U.S. has never been used before. It's considered the nuclear option, and it was designed to protect the EU from foreign pressure. Obviously, the hope is that dialogue will prevail. And the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, he spoke with the president yesterday, and he says, in part, we will continue working on this, and I look forward to seeing him in Davos later this week. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer spoke with the president as well, and he says this.
Any decision about the future status of Greenland belongs to the people of Greenland and the Kingdom of Denmark alone. The use of tariffs against allies is completely wrong, nor is it helpful to frame efforts to strengthen Greenland's security as a justification for economic pressure.
The president, though, still appears unmoved. The president saying on Truth Social, we have subsidized Denmark and all of the countries of the European Union for many years by not charging them tariffs. It is time for Denmark to give back. World peace is at stake. China and Russia want Greenland, and there is nothing that Denmark can do about it. The tariffs on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, Netherlands, and Finland are set to kick in on February 1st. They begin at 10%, but will increase to 25% in June until a deal for the U.S. to buy Greenland is reached. And like Rutte said, the president will be heading to the World Economic Forum in Davos later on this week. He's expected to make a speech on Wednesday, where leaders are going to be using this as an opportunity to hopefully de-escalate the situation. With Ainsley and Brian.
All right, thanks, Maddie. Just a side note, Marco Rubio's son is at Florida. Not
Miami.
Yeah, not Miami, but he's running back there. Maybe they'll win the national championship soon. So in Greenland, CBS did a poll, only 14% of the country are in support of taking Greenland by force. Only 30% approve of buying it. So I think the president's got to make his case to the American people for this, but in terms of rare earth, in terms of location, in terms of building military bases, pathway to the Arctic, nobody disputes the value here. My hope is there's a deal. You know, between Denmark not being able to get rare earth itself, between the people of Greenland, 86,000 who mostly fish, they need us to do it. So couldn't we work out a deal where we take control of the rare earth, we give the people of Greenland their third, a third, and we take half. Then we expand our military bases there because Denmark cannot do it, or else they would have done it already. And we have a right, evidently, in a treaty we signed in 1951 to expand our military presence there. And maybe we could start with the Golden Dome. The Golden Dome needs a presence. We need some ground operations to be able to have missile defense there. So I just hope there's a deal that can be done because they work so hard to get that EU deal done, the trade deal done. It's a fantastic deal for both sides. I hate to see it blown up.
Yeah, now he's saying he's going to impose taxes on U.S. goods that are bought from all of these other countries.
And they're going to retaliate on us.
It would be, I mean, if anyone can do it, it could be America that would be able to defend Greenland against Russia. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent talks about how this would be good for defense. Listen.
President Trump strongly believes that we cannot outsource our security because, Kristen, let me tell you what will happen, and it might not be next year, might not be in 5 years, but down the road, this fight for the Arctic is real. We would keep our NATO our NATO guarantees, and if there were an attack on Greenland from Russia, from some other area, we would get dragged in. So better now, peace through strength, make it part of the United States, and there will not be a conflict because the United States right now, we are the hottest country in the world. We are the strongest country in the world. The Europeans project weakness. The U.S. projects strength.
The hottest country in the world headed to Davos, where this is going to be front and center. You know, to your point, Brian, I think you're exactly right. The president needs to explain it, but many are looking at it, folks in the media covering it, saying Trump's off his rocker. Guess what? A lot of previous U.S. presidents have looked at this for the very reason that years ago, World War II, prior to that, we had multiple bases. Now we only have one base, but it's clear that from a national security standpoint, we need more. And no one's stopping us from building more. And I think we should. I think maybe the president is just pushing the goalpost forward and willing to stop at the 50. Meanwhile, maybe his goal the whole time was to stop at the 50, but he's pushing it forward in order to maximize the deal. It looks like the NATO countries say they will face escalating tariffs are Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, UK, Netherlands, and Finland. And then the EU has threatened a bazooka against us, meaning they're essentially going to hit us with tariffs on all our goods. And the thing is, the president right now is trying to get the economy in order. He doesn't need anything to trip up anything that would, because it looks like we're about to fire on all cylinders as an economy.
Yeah.
I thought we could focus on India's trade deal and not have to redo EU's trade deal.
The tariffs are worth about $107.7 billion. So it would impose these higher import taxes on a wide range of U.S. goods. And he says it would effectively take place beginning on February 1st, 10% extra for U.S. goods. It really does make a difference. It does.
Jump in the line, rock your body on time. Okay, I believe you, jump in the line.
Hello and welcome to Talking Politics. I'm Tom Bradby.
And I'm Robert Peston.
And we're recording this episode on Monday because obviously the world's gone crazy like it seems to do every Monday with Donald Trump apparently poised or not discuss to invade Greenland and certainly choosing to punish European nations who show signs of resisting him. I thought I'd start by saying, as I watched Keir Starmer's press conference this morning, I just had this overpowering sense of what a terrible, terrible position we are in as a country. And the reason why is very simple. We're integrated in an operational way with the Americans at every level. And there are bits of that, bits of our organizations that could disentangle themselves, however painfully. So, of course, the Secret Intelligence Service could disentangle itself from the CIA. MI5 could disentangle itself from FBI. I think arguably or unarguably, the world would be a more dangerous place if they did, but that is certainly plausible. But when you look at the military hardware and the defense sense, it gets much, much more difficult. There's been a lot of focus on a nuclear deterrent, which is technically independent, but actually in any meaningful sense, in the medium to long term, not operable without, the system launch is shared with the Americans, the targeting data is shared with the Americans, so realistically it's not going to work without the Americans. You go to the level beneath that, you've got F-35s, very quickly they'd be inoperable without the Americans. The Apache, our main attack helicopter wouldn't work. At the level beneath that, you've got surface-to-air missiles, we share with the Americans, we buy from the Americans. Now the military people I've talked to today say, yes, fine, you could replace that. There are European equivalents for most things.
Well, not next week, we can't.
No, it's going to take a decade. And the point that was made to me is you've got to buy it, that's massively expensive, but then you've got to train people on it, and that just takes a very long time. So everyone I spoke to said, you want to be independent of the Americans, that's going to take 10 years and a ton of money. Now that, I guess, explains Keir Starmer's very, very softly approach.
Sky News, the full story first.
Coming up, Donald Trump is threatening tariffs on Britain for saying he probably shouldn't invade Greenland. So has this special relationship become a toxic one? Donald Trump